5 select board meeting to order.
The town does it, they pay on
And
their,
we'd like to call the
they get,
finance committee meeting to order as well.
All members present except Christina Pedoni. All right, I will just turn it over to you guys.
Nice job.
Yep,
that's easy.
that's easy.
A month.
Tell me what I need to know and be able to do.
Water and electric is all in one bill, and I tap it on that every month.
Objectives for the meeting. So, as you all know, I drafted some budget messages that we could consider town. And they were meant as grounds for discussion. They're based largely on the work that Chris and the committee had done last year, updated largely and reformatted to what we're dealing with as far as challenges this year. It also does presume the budget we were working with before from Leslie of nominally $830,000 budget gap.
Sure.
So, as far as what we're looking for tonight is largely, with the town meeting coming up, the question is, do we want to consider presenting an override option to town to eliminate some of the cuts that will be necessary? We try to close the 830K gap by cuts, or do we choose to have citizens to contribute a little bit more? Pros and cons, obviously, to both. So, looking, I think from my perspective, and open discussion, I wasn't really prepared to lead the meeting, but
No.
I'm happy to get started.
More to that point, just to frame it out, I think is important. I want to say thank you. I really appreciated both presentations. I know they're generally the same with, slightly different flavor, but they're really well done and informative. So I really appreciate that and put into focus really what we're looking at here. So the options we have are threefold. Straight up budget, no override. That's the 830 gap. There's a full override, which is what, $1.7 million?
That is an option, but I think there's more or less general consensus, we probably don't want to go that route, so that's an awfully big ask.
That is a big ask, and that's part of why I was framing that out is, at the other end, we have got that, but we've got a middle ground. So I think with regard to that, the two presentations put together, the second one of which really just discussed the level, or the
900.
I'm sorry?
The 900.
The 900 budget, and then no override, right?
Yeah, the second presentation, if we're gonna put that up, yeah, those are the three options.
So let's,
900K override, budget cuts, or
Or a bigger override. So I think we're leaning more towards just having an override or no override, just one number, right?
I believe the
I
second.
think it's slide 30 or
option
something.
was
What's
to
that?
take care of the structural deficits, which I think we've
That's-
somewhat determined probably is not prudent.
You're saying it's not prudent to take care of the structural override, or
Well-
structural deficit?
well, with
It's prudent, maybe
Okay,
prudent
good,
is perhaps
all
the wrong word. Prudent.
No, that's
would
okay.
be Absolutely to take care of the structural deficit we've
All at
had
once.
since the beginning of time.
It could be suicidal.
But if it means killing a chance of, getting the funds that we need to get through this budget year without severe cuts, then we continue with the structural deficit that we've always had, utilizing free cash for not more than 1% of the operating budget.
yeah, it's just a question, when do we choose to bite the bullet? Each year we don't pass an override, our deficit will probably increase roughly 300,000 to 400,000 in light of what's potentially coming with the pay-as-you-throw contracts. That could actually be up by 600,000 or so this coming year, depending on the path we choose to take. So, I think it's probably important to put those choices in front of the citizens so they can decide which path they want to take. But we also have some new numbers that Leslie had created today, looking at a little bit harder set of cuts with the town side.
Right.
So I don't know if we want to talk about that after we've gone through the presentation, or we want to start with that.
I'll just talk about I think, I'm not opposed to the strategy at the last town meeting where you start with one budget that balances and you progressively get to the next. I think that's what we did last year, and we just fell off after the first budget. I mean, they didn't do the override, they did the first one. I don't mind doing that again, and we could have a third. I mean, I don't know when people are gonna be exhausted, though, you know?
I think it's important to kind of, maybe just kind of go through the presentations. We can all kind of see where we're at right now. But at the end, maybe we can discuss, we can individually discuss what we were thinking in terms of path forward. So if you want to maybe just start with the
Sure.
presentation.
Okay, I'm rehearsed and I'm prepared. Are you running the show?
I can.
Okay. So this is a simple list of where we've accumulated information from so far this year. Next slide. So I've solicited some feedback from Finance Committee, but honestly, we haven't really had a chance to discuss this as well. So this is not yet tuned, if I might say. So last year, and this is probably clear to everybody, we had projected a $1.3 million structural deficit, which in fact is real. But at town.
Did you move that just a little closer to your
Sure. At town meeting, obviously we proposed the override. We went for a 5-year override, which has its strategic pros and cons. And the town opted to go with the make-do budget, basically some series of cuts and use of one-time revenues to balance the budget. So this year's message, we're looking at more like a $1.7 million structural operating deficit with fewer options, as we no longer have ARPA as a source to fund some of the expenses. And as time goes on, we'll be progressively eating into more free cash, so these things are not going to get better. So basic structure to the discussion, we'll go a little bit through the background of taxes.
Before you get to that 1.7, is there any breakdown?
There'll be some later in the presentation. So we'll talk through operating budget and expenses. We'll talk about the sources of the gap and options going forward. So everybody likes to see how you do compared to your neighbors. So we pulled up this year's current tax rates by towns in this area. So West Boylston is just slightly above the average for this region, not noticeably above or below. So it's not unreasonable, our current tax rate. Next. As we all have painfully experienced, we're limited by the Prop 2.5 regulations, where we can only increase our property tax revenues by 2.5% per year without special passage of overrides. So it's calculated each year based on levy limit and the operating budget that gets approved at town meeting. So just a simple diagram, and this is generally oriented around people that aren't as familiar with what we're talking about. So revenue sources this year, taxation is 73%. State aid at 13%, I think is maybe one of the more concerning line items with the uncertainty in the state budget and the adversarial relationship between the Healy and Trump administrations. I think we don't know what we're going to get yet. Hopefully it doesn't change, but we just don't know.
What was it last year? Do you know the percentage was?
I think it's in a later slide. So, this is just a breakdown of the expense, the revenue sources that we have for this year. This was pre-Leslie's latest version, which, I think the revenue side didn't change, right?
The revenue did not change.
On a relative basis, the only notable changes here is new growth is down. Last year was 150K. And there've been minor changes otherwise. Nothing all that consequential. So growth of the funding sources over time, we're just taking 5-year increments. And the new growth line should really catch your attention. Not that that's a large percentage of the total budget. Unfortunately, local receipts just don't grow in pace with our expense increases. Next. Again, just to take a look at what our growth has been over time. Inflation for the same time period is about 3.5%. So, we are at 3%. I'm sorry, our average is 3.5%. The average over from the Bureau of Labor Statistics is 3%. So we're above the average, but we're a small town. We don't have some of the resources that other facilities have. Kind of breakdown of expenses from our current budget. The next slide is maybe a little bit more interesting. We can see what the expense growth is by department. Notable here is public safety has gone up considerably. This is functional artifact of the full-time fire department. The other one is the other benefits, insurance, etc. 9.5%, but that 9.5% represents just under $800,000 of additional expenses this one year. So growth by department, just giving you a little bit of a graphical perception. Sorry. So you can see the employee benefit, which is the top box here, has gone up from 4.6 million to 7.7 million over this 10-year time span. So it's nearly doubled. That's pretty substantial. The other one that's notable is education. On a percentage basis, it's gone up by a lot less, but it is by far the single largest budget line item we have. By department, you can see the relative growth rate. So, public safety stands out. Intergovernmental looks like a big number, but the actual is not substantial. The employee benefit line, the last one, 66%. Those two are really dominating our expense growth. We'll have to skip through these. These are not updated. I haven't been able to get the information I need from the schools for these slides. So the budget gap, Roger, you were asking what's in that 1.7 million. Well, this is the answer. So schools closed their gap by, should be 545K of spending cuts. The town's current deficit is 830K. I rounded up because we don't really have everything finalized. And we're using 300K in free cash, which we've done for an extended period of time, and it's part of the Select Board's free cash policy. But it basically means that we're not including that in this year's budget. So, so the key reasons, the schools are basically dipping into the school choice funding to help balance the budget substantially. In the end, the schools have increased by just over 2% this year. It's not particularly huge, but it's on a very large budget. And we haven't had a operating override since 1992, and 2.5% per year on property taxes is simply not enough to keep pace with all of the other expense growths. And we know we had 6 to 8% inflation a couple of years ago. That got us a little bit behind. And you know, it's non-linear, particularly things like insurance, which you don't have a lot of control over. I think they were up 14%. So there's a lot of our budget line items that are not anything close to the 2.5% that property tax allow us to take. Next.
Here, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
On the school item, 524, is it the total amount we need?
That is the amount that was yielded from the layoffs that the school has executed.
Okay. How about the 900,000 from the town?
Well, that's basically, Leslie's number was 832K. I've rounded it up because those are preliminary numbers, and I didn't want to have to keep revising them for now. And we'll put the right number in when we have real numbers to work from.
Where is the shortage? What?
So those numbers, as I understand, were based on the department head budgets as they came through
Yes,
to Leslie
yep,
for fiscal 2026.
that was the original ask from each department to be able to,
Level service.
exactly, yep.
So is that includes buying some of the larger equipment, larger?
No, capital is totally
Capital
separate,
is not.
right, not,
This is
Capital.
only the personal.
this is purely
Pay for
the operating
salary
budget.
and,
Yeah.
keep the department running.
So to be clear, then the structural budget, the structural deficit is the level service. Right, so if we're gonna maintain a level service, that's the
Well,
number.
it's a little bit of a hybrid. It would be level service, I think, on the town side. The schools have made some cutbacks. I
Sure.
think they're comfortable that they can manage with those cuts, but I guess I'm a little apprehensive calling that level service because they have less
Yeah, I
personnel.
think it is, Ray, in fairness, because having attended that, I know they've cut positions.
Yep.
And that's something that I don't think we've asked any of the other town departments to do at this point, correct? I don't.
Well, that is something Leslie will go through in a little
Okay,
bit.
so she will,
Yes.
all right.
She has a version of the budget that takes into account
Thanks.
some additional cuts.
All right, so the message then is, it's more or less a level service with some cuts already baked in.
At this
That's,
time,
yeah.
yes.
Yep, and I think Leslie's gonna
So I'll,
pleasure us with.
yeah, so no changes to the
So
projected picture at this point.
can we go back to the other slide before?
Just bear in mind, this is a snapshot of what we knew a week ago. Put on paper for discussion. So,
Yep.
Things are changing. We do get more information, and we'll be updating it as we do.
So I totally agree. I just want to clear myself, so looking at the numbers. So this 525, is this before the layoffs or after layoff?
Before.
Before layoff.
Yes.
Yes, after the last they'd be zero.
After the layoff, do they need any money now?
So the budget from the town already includes 300,000
300,000.
for the
Yep.
schools.
So with that,
Above what they got last year.
with that, they can run safely.
Mhm.
With the 300,000, they can run safely.
That's what Mr. Mappas said, yeah.
Is that the 300,000 the cash box?
No.
No.
No,
No,
that's not.
that's
That's a
different,
separate item.
separate. That's
What is that item? Cash policy.
Basically, each year, the cash policy that we've allowed ourselves, we take 300K from this year's free cash to fund next year's budget.
Okay.
So it's
So
an
we are
artifact.
using the free cash on that.
I
We've
think-
done it all along, so
Yeah.
that the drive to make that adjustment and have a true balanced budget that doesn't take advantage of prior years isn't a huge driving force. It's just not necessarily great fiscal policy.
Yeah, that's a different term, that's why I'm asking. Earlier, we used to say free cash, right? The cash policy is a free cash.
Yeah.
It's the handling of free cash is the policy that we're talking about.
Just to touch upon the free cash part, though, I think later in here you have what what we should be using, I think is 1% of free cash every year towards the budget is what, standard practice should be.
It's 1% of your operating budget.
Of operating budget.
The use of free cash should not exceed that each year.
But we have been using it, and
Yes.
it's going to deplete in a few years, essentially.
Your free cash is determined every year.
Mhm.
When we submit our final statements to the state, they go over and look at whatever revenues exceeded what the estimates were, whatever expenditures came in lower than what was budgeted, a bunch of other factors that go into them certifying our free cash and basically saying, okay, you came out of FY '25 with this amount of money left over that you can now use in your subsequent year to appropriate towards the needs of the subsequent year. The state recommends very strongly that it be for one-time use. So typically, they don't like to see a reliance on your operating budget every year to take from free cash.
Which is what we've been doing, correct?
Which is what we have been doing. We did institute the financial reserve policy to try to keep us at least within those rails, so that we weren't like, okay, we've got 500,000 of free cash, let's just put it all towards the budget, because that is not something you can count on each year. Your free cash goes up and down each year, depending on the results of each fiscal year.
And to that point, our free cash is somewhat artificially inflated this year.
Absolutely, it has been since COVID, because of all of the federal funds that were available to us at that time, which we were able to use very wisely in purchasing items, in bolstering some budgets and such, that we were very careful not to make our budget rely on those one-time federal funds. So any benefit that we have received as a result of the way that we managed the ARPA monies, you are going to see it perhaps for one more year, and then that is going to drop precipitously.
So basically, the 5 plus the 9 plus the 3 is how you get to that 1.7. So that's, but if we take away the 5 and the 3, we're kind of at that 9.
Yeah, so Vanessa, to answer your question in part, are we burning through our free cash? That's a question that we will have to answer each year. How much we pull out of free cash for either one-time expenditures or for the operating budget varies by year based on needs and requirements, and how much new free cash we get is some function of how conservative our budgeting process was, how predictable the expenses were that came in, other local receipts, what changed that we didn't account for is either going to be a plus or minus. So are we burning through it? I wouldn't say we're burning through it. I think that's probably a mischaracterization, but
You could be limiting your future
yeah.
based on what you're spending today, because what we've been able to do for the past few years is carry over some free cash. So we were able to guarantee we're going to have at least this $400,000 or $500,000 because we didn't use it last year. So we kind of set ourselves up in a better position. For many, many years back in the early 2000s, when I first joined the town, there were town meetings where we spent every penny of free cash, and we had no carryover. In most of the past 20 years, we did not have a carryover, and we worked very, very hard to start having a base free cash amount that we didn't spend every penny at town meetings to, carry us over, give us that buffer in case we needed it for the rainy day that might come. Bear in mind, free cash is used to fund your capital investment fund, okay, which we pay our capital items from that we are not seeking borrowing on. So your smaller capital items that we can pay for with cash and not incur borrowing costs, that is what we use our capital investment fund for. Free cash funds the capital investment through an appropriation at town meeting every year. Stabilization, that is the source. That's the river feeding into that ocean as well. There's no other way to get money into stabilization, which truly is your saving rainy day account. You really don't want to turn to that as your first source of money, because you could be in a lot worse shape down the road. You need to build that savings up. And free cash is what funds your stabilization fund. So every year. And OPEB is not going anywhere. So our free cash funds OPEB every year, because there's really no other source unless we dedicate another source of revenue specifically through a special stabilization fund. Free cash becomes your source for those critical funds that we have.
Just for, purposes of, if somebody ever asked the question, not for tonight, but is there, like a 10-year window that you've shown how much free cash we've gotten
Oh,
each year
always.
versus?
Oh, yeah.
Is it trend in any certain way? Is it we've been somewhat level or?
Kind of like, the
Okay.
roller coasters
Yeah.
at Six Flags. You know, it's, as I said, it's all based very much on, we've started leveling that curve a little bit by knowing what we were gonna start in with next year, building that buffer by not spending every dime. But free cash, I mean, you've seen the analyses and such, and I'm happy to forward that to everyone. It's, yeah.
I think part of the policy too, along those lines, is that every year, there's an article on warrant, for funding stabilization.
Mhm.
Because as your budget grows, you also want a proportional growth in that stabilization fund.
Yeah.
So you wanna make sure that you have some funds going in, and our budget's certainly grown, as Ray demonstrated. So we wanna make sure we have a component of that going towards
Yeah.
that.
Because there is another financial policy that says we will strive to have at least 5% of the operating budget in stabilization, with the goal of reaching at least 10%, which would be your recommended solid financial position. And that is something that your rating agencies look at. What's your stabilization? What are your reserves, and so forth. Raj?
That leads to how much we have in free cash this year.
So right now at free cash, I believe I gave Ray that number today, and sitting there today is $1,088,000 in change. Okay, 1088 and some change on top of that. And that's a result of what was certified by the state, for us from FY '24, and we spent some of it at the October town meeting. So that's where we sit today. So from that $1,088,000, we need to take out the $308,000 that we're putting in as a funding source for this FY '26 budget. So that brings us down to what, $780 available at this point. And I'm not quite sure what other articles are targeting spending of free cash right now.
The OPEB's there for the 300, that's what we're trying to do.
The OPEB, we've been plugging in the $100,000 pretty consistently from what we had tried to set aside from ARPA. So I feel that, I believe we are where we need to be right now, and we do not need to make an appropriation at this May town meeting. We
Okay.
typically fund ARPA in the fall, OPEB in the fall,
Next meeting.
because that's when we have the brand-new, fresh, free cash certification, so we know what we have to put in there.
Maybe we should mention snow and ice in this discussion, that free cash is, can be depleted if we have a bad winter.
So typically with snow and ice, every year within our health insurance budget, we have to build in contingencies of, we don't know how many folks are gonna end up going from a single plan to a family plan. We don't know, if we have a retiree, that person then joins our health insurance premium cost, and their replacement may or may not join our health insurance replacement cost. So we have to build in a number of bodies that allow us that amount in the budget to absorb these additional costs, because we can't exactly count on them each year. Typically, we are able to correct snow and ice through a budget fix from our health insurance premium excess at town meeting in May. Free cash could also be a source if we did not have a sufficient surplus in the budget for health insurance to cover it. Free cash could also be a source for that as well. We try to avoid going into the next fiscal year with a snow and ice deficit, which is allowed by law, but you are then taking it off of what you've got available for spending from your levy in the subsequent year. So we always try to clean up our snow and ice before we get out of the fiscal year, to make sure that we're not, that can truly hasn't been kicked, and now we have to pay the piper for that play. Okay, so yes, free cash can be utilized to take care of a snow and ice deficit, and thus far, snow and ice, looks good. And I say that because I can only tell you what has physically left the coffers in the form of an invoice and a check that has gone out to a vendor. Right now, we're looking at $63,000 maybe for a snow and ice deficit. There could still be invoices over at the DPW that have not made their way into the DPW or into the accounting office yet for salt deliveries, which are substantial. Each time we get a delivery, it's a lot of money. Surprisingly, paying your drivers to plow is not your most expensive cost in snow and ice. It's minimal. It's your materials that kills you on this thing. So right now, we're in good shape. That will change, I promise you, by the time we get to town meeting in about a month. But hopefully, it will not change substantially. And hopefully, we won't get hit with a blizzard of 25 in April. I did it now.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Yeah, raise sunshine over here. So, snow and ice this year, hopefully, we're going in a positive position, which will then help our free cash budget, our free cash number. So, when we get to the town meeting in the fall and the free cash number's out there, everybody's gonna go, what were you talking about? Look at that number. Again, these are all factors that I can't anticipate right now. And that will flow through from how our year ends on June 30th.
Okay, so continuing along, key reasons for the growing gap, state aid, I think we all know it's just not keeping pace. Doesn't seem to be a priority that it should keep pace. Prop 2.5 is simply not enough in, the current day reality. New growth, we are largely an MDC hamlet, so there's not a lot of room for us to get money out of new growth. One-time funds, ARPA, is done. We were able to take advantage of that for 3-4 years. It was great. It's gone. Free cash, and we talked about it a lot. It's hard to characterize what's to come, but based on the budget pressures we've been under, we've been trying to be a little less conservative on some of those estimates so that there's more money available for the operating budget. At some point in that in time, that'll come and bite us. But you got to do what you got to do to try to make the budgets work now. School funding, their ability to absorb some of their costs from school choice is getting more limited, and their version of the ARPA funds is also at an end. On the flip side, the increase in expenses, the restructuring of the fire department has been a very substantial increase in costs. Not that we have any choices if we want to have fire protection in town, but that's been a huge one. This year, between insurance increases and allocated retiring expenses, over $750,000 one-year change. Since our deficit right now is $830K, you can allocate almost all of it to that line item if you chose to. Continue to get mandates where the state tells you have to do something and doesn't choose to give you the money to help pay for it. And trash is going to be a point of contention as we go forward, as we're trying to figure out what to do with the new contract or contracts. So that'll be a source of stress going forward for sure.
Can you just give me one example of a mandate that, something this year that happened or that could happen that?
Stormwater,
What is it?
stormwater,
Okay, yeah.
right, EPA.
They're requiring that going forward, and I think we've scheduled some of that into some of the ARPA funding, but it's not gonna last forever.
Yeah, I think the schools end up with a lot more mandates that have to get serviced with, special needs of various sorts that have to be done in a very specific way. So,
Library budget is a mandate?
yeah.
Special education tends to be, fluctuate wildly because you can have one family move in and
Absolutely.
heavy needs.
That's something you just absolutely cannot control. Next. So we've talked about our free cash policy. The reg says it should not be more than 1%, which we've chosen to take as it's 1%, and we've done 1% for as long as I can remember. Typically, in the management of that, first we pull off the free cash for next year's operating budget, which this year is $308K. Typically, then there's a small bucket that goes to some of the budget fix articles, and a chunk that will go to capital investments, and a chunk for OPEB. So there's plenty of
places to put that, and, you know, we have to decide how much to put into each of those. So, what are the options? Well, we can cut our budgets to match our revenues. We can execute a Prop 2.5 override, or we could use one-time funds to float the difference. And I think nobody wants to use that as a means of balancing the budget, but in the interest of full discussion, it is an option.
That's a credit card.
Excuse me?
That's a credit card, right?
That's
Yeah.
breaking open the piggy bank
Yeah.
and taking it all.
All right.
If not 100%, can we use 50%?
Can we, I'm sorry.
You could use, I mean, if the
Any
town-
amount we can use, but
You could use whatever, you know, whatever the town wishes to use, it just creates
the future.
challenges for it. Well, no, yeah, whether it be bond ratings, whether it be, you know, again, down the road, we're gonna have the same thing a year from now, again.
What are we going
And
for
less.
bond rating?
What-
Is there any bond rating coming up? We have
Well,
nothing, right?
Um,
Yeah, we've
Could
got the
very well
school.
be, I think we're talking schools, we're
Fire-
talking DPWs, fire departments.
It's definitely essential we have a good bond rating.
I mean, it's not without cost. I
No,
mean,
I'm not,
just
I'm
we-
not,
yeah.
I'm just getting a clarification, that's all.
Yeah.
I'm not against any of the projects,
Just asking the question.
just asking the
Yeah.
questions for me to understand, as well as for the town,
Yeah.
this is televised, town folks to understand.
Well, you know, part of the outcome of this is going to be the education process for the town to understand, if we take that route, there are consequences, and they are,
Mhm.
and go into some detail on what those consequences are. So, lessons learned from last year. So the override targeting a 5-year operating budget correction failed pretty definitively. If I summarize it in 3 bullets, voters clearly didn't want to agree to a scope of more than 1 year. We had multiple people get up and say, why 5 years? The general sentiment was that voters wanted more perceived control over the budget oversight process. Even though they're approving the budget each year, there was a general feeling that somehow they're losing control. And I have a hard time rationalizing that's true, but it was the perception, so we have to deal with that. Voters thought it placed too much control in the hands of the administration as to budget priorities for too long a period of time. I'm thinking when really disagrees with these, and the question is, okay, what lessons did we learn? Well, we're probably never gonna go for a 5-year override again. Okay, next.
Can I, Ray, at this time?
Yeah.
Can we go back to the other slide, please? I don't think so, they voted because of 5-year, we asked for it. Because, my feeling is, when I talk to some of the residents, they all expressed. So we did ask for 5 years, but we never ever said, what is the first year budget, how it looks like? What is the second year budget, how it looks like? What is the third year?
No, we did.
No.
We did,
Yes,
that's
we
how we
did.
came up
Because
with
it
it.
was 200-something thousand, I think.
No,
last year, right? That we needed to use out of it?
Yeah, we did.
We were seeking to.
Or in other words, I think, this is what my take on that is, we go to the town meeting, we ask for 5 years,
Mhm.
and when it is approved, and the second year onwards, who are in charge for the budget, they can change whatever they want. That is the thing, the people did not like it.
I mean, I think,
We need to have a clear vision, okay, this first year, these are all the things, so we have to put that money aside. The second year, this much money, for this purpose, separate account. So if we justify why we need 5 years, how much money goes to each year, we may accomplish. This is what they did in another towns. They were able to get an override for 5 years.
what I heard was, hey, we haven't had an override in X period of time and nothing bad has happened. Why are we gonna go to 5 years, just write a big check for 5 years and not have, to these points here, which is, we can't see 5 years out. Even we weren't able to really articulate that. What do the out years look like, and what happens if we run out of money in year 3? Which goes,
Can I interject? I'm sorry.
I'm saying, I'm not saying that that was our perception, I'm just saying that that's what I heard from the meeting itself.
We did present the 5-year budget projections to the town, because that's how we had to come up with the 5-year need for the override.
Right.
So we did those projections. We could only base those projections on the past 10 years, which is what we had done. What have been our increases? But what do we know has happened in our world that didn't happen 10 years ago, that we now know we're gonna have to build in more than just the historical increase? So we did project 5-year budgets
we
that
def-
got us to that point.
I'm not denying we did projected it, but we didn't give a clear, how do I put it?
I
Well,
think
we
that,
didn't, so you're saying we didn't give a line item description of.
Not
where-
a line
what-
item,
What,
or-
what
No, more-
DPW would be.
Year by year.
I think
Year by
really
year.
what it comes down to is, I don't know how good a job we did at educating and saying, here's, because we still had people not understanding, okay, here's the levy limit, and here's the, so if you don't get that basic, you're not gonna get the 5 years out.
Right.
And I know for a fact I heard folks, and no, I didn't go back and listen to the meeting or anything, but I know for a fact that folks were saying, what happens if we run out of money in year 3? We don't have any control over the out years, and it was a big ask, and I don't know how good an opportunity, how much of an opportunity we took to do the education piece.
And what would you do differently? mean,
I don't
you made
know.
Numerous
So-
presentations.
I-
You can't force people to show up.
I'm not saying we did anything wrong here. What I'm saying is, I don't think the message
It wasn't heard.
resonated.
Is
It wasn't
what you're
heard.
saying, yeah.
Yeah.
So truly, I mean, I think based on that, if we're going to have any budget conversation at all, we can't go more than 1 year, because folks aren't going to be able to hear that. We're not going to be able to have those education forums. And even if we could, how much are people going to be able to hear? Because folks are already of a mind, hey, nothing bad happened last year.
Right, we made it through.
We made it through.
Well,
I think the takeaway is,
Here's what we're
we
looking at
don't do
this
more
year.
than 1 year.
That's
I
ultimately
just-
what I'm
I
saying.
would- I just wanted to kind of, this was part of what I want to talk about a little bit later, is maybe just to kind of walk through, maybe not a 5-year, but maybe a shorter time frame, maybe 2 or 3 years, only because of contracts that we need to sign, specifically trash. So maybe we could discuss that at a later point, but I just don't think that we need to just say 1 year from now on. I think 1 year is probably going to happen, but maybe just discuss 2 to 3 possibility as well.
I would just work on the education or whatever, the message, and maybe not talk about it in years, but in amounts, because that is easier to understand, and just put it in amounts that you have to get to. So this is what we have to get to. We could do this again next year to get the rest of the way, maybe do something like that. But I just think you have to explain it in a way that's sort of a little bit more
I mean, not to
short term.
jump the gun or anything, but, if we're gonna be talking about a trash contract, right now, it's a 5-year contract. So if we were to go back and ask for a 3-year contract, let's say the override passes this year, what happens if it doesn't next year? Then we're going to have to break the contract or take a big chunk from something else.
Or there's
The
choice to be
override
made.
changes your amount that you can ask for every year
Mhm.
by 2.5%. The trash contract would be the same each year, or no?
No.
Yeah, it's 5% per year increase, the way
Well,
it's laid out right now.
Yeah, the next year would actually be more because of the bins too. So this is kind of my problem
Yeah,
is,
we
Yeah.
could probably
Okay.
talk about that in the end. So it's its own subject. And,
Okay.
the reality is whatever choices we make this year are gonna dictate what the consequences are in out years.
Mhm.
So the number of how much of a operating deficit we expect next year is entirely dependent on what we do this year. So those do get tied together. And we know the trash issue is there, and there's ways to ameliorate that. Other things we'll have to be talking about, for sure. Okay, so service budget, service/budget cuts. So there aren't a lot of choices as far as where we can cut that creates a 900K magnitude of cut.
So, and this option is the option, no override, just a regular budget.
This would just be straight up budget cuts.
So this is the first option
Option
we
A,
talk about.
service and budget cuts. we could eliminate trash. That frees up, I think it was 600 and some odd K. And fund the balance out of one-time sources, free cash or whatever. But it doesn't seem very viable. The numbers we have from SWAT say the cost per family would average about $700 per home for trash pickup. That's about 2.5 times what we're paying now. So if we opt for this, it's gonna cost taxpayers more by doing so.
It's gonna affect single residence homes, or homes, right? Because what we've got now is we've got a highly subsidized service amongst, businesses are paying the taxes, but they're not getting the trash, right? So you got apartment complexes, they're paying the taxes, but they're not getting the trash. So what that does is that then focuses that back all on the homeowners and the single-family units, right? So,
That just even makes it worse.
correct. That's my point, though.
But still, in the end, if it's 2.5 times more, it's already a bad idea. If it's 3 times more in reality, it's even worse idea, but, I don't think we need to go that far. But it is a line item that could be cut that would help us do a 900K cut if we need to go there.
That saves the town money. It doesn't save the individuals in town money. So that's
right.
it's cost shifting. So to be clear, that's what that line item is.
I think what Ray's doing though is just bringing that up because that's an immediate
My-
something that we could do without impacting personnel,
My-
town employees, so on and so forth.
Yeah, my intention here isn't to nitpick. My intention here is to highlight the idea that this is the consideration before we put that out there. If you want to eliminate it, cool, I'm with it. I mean, I think a user tax is probably where you need to be if you want to limit the amount of tax. Yes, I'm saying that. But that doesn't do the individuals in town that.
That's saying that.
Yeah.
Right.
It comes with a big penalty. Number 2, elimination of multiple town departments in entirety. You take a look through our budget line items, most of the departments are, 50K, 20K, 100K. To get to 900K, there's only a few departments that could generate that kind of yield. And looking at them, there's not many. We could close the library, close the senior center, and put in another 200 to 300K of free cash, and we can get to 900, for instance. And I'm not advocating
Not
that we do that,
advocating, but
but
just highlighting the point.
that's the scale of numbers that we need.
But to that point, you close the library, and that has other consequences downstream. That's not
Everything here has consequences.
correct.
You still have to heat the buildings.
You still have to heat the buildings, and
But, again, this is really aimed for public education. These are your choices. Here are your consequences. Do you want to go there? I think by and large, the answer is gonna be no, but, okay, there are options. Elimination of entire shifts of public safety support. Again, a really bad idea, but looking at the sheer volume of dollars in the accounts, combine that with kind of requirements of public safety. We can't have one police officer on duty. It's not safe. So we either lose the shift or we keep the shift. And taking one officer out doesn't make any sense. The same is true for fire. There are safety issues for the personnel involved, so, do we as a town want to lose a shift of either the police or fire? I think the answer is probably no, but again, that's in the realm of what we can get to 900K with. The final one, elimination or reduction of school programs. Again, that's a $14 million budget. We can get 900K cuts, and if you take the average school teacher salary at something around $80,000, and you can do the math, you're talking 11 or 12 positions, and you're not going to be picking the typically more senior personnel, so it might even be more positions.
And I'm pretty sure contractually, we're past the point at which we could notify folks.
Again, it's what gets us to 900K. So there may be others. These are the only ones that leap to mind as far as what's possible. I didn't say likely. I didn't say we want to, but those will get us there. Next. So, Prop 2.5 override, so we're proposing a 900K override based on everything we know now as the number we would probably try for. Obviously, they'll come out of property taxes. I've got a chart a little bit later. I think it's about $250 per house for the 900K override for the average home value in town. It doesn't correct the structural operating deficit, so it's very likely there'll be another override to come in '27. It's a message we will have to really emphasize because this is not fixing the entire structural deficit. This includes the school staff layoffs that's already occurred, just so everybody's clear. Costs, this is a chart that follows. So what do we get? Basically largely level surface services, but we're kicking the can down the road. More pain to follow. Next. So this is the rough numbers. And I put up a full scale here because we don't know if we're going for 900, if that's the right number. So there's some scaling here so you can take a look at what if it's a little more, a little less. My home costs more, my home costs less. But $290 for median home for a 900K override. Next. We could use one-time funds. Stabilization, free cash, overlay surplus. We already use kind of reallocation of insurance premiums to do budget fix articles. It could be on the list, but I didn't put it here. We go there, if we pull stabilization under 5%, it will impact our bond rating and it will cost us more to borrow money. If the structural deficit next year, as I mentioned before, is going up normally 300K to 400K a year without extraordinary issues. Pay as you throw might add another 300 to 400K on top of that. So it just gets worse if you don't fix it now. And frankly, it's a poor fiscal management practice. And we haven't talked about this as a group, but I assume everybody on the finance committee would object against this. So took a little liberty there. It hasn't really gone through that much review. Next. So what happens next? We'd propose two budgets, as we were talking about before. We'd offer a budget that includes service cuts and one that had an override. Obviously, we need to have both a town meeting and a town election to get those done, so two separate votes, some amount of costs associated with that. The language here has to change. I didn't go through it quite that well. If the override doesn't pass, that'll be necessary to consider it again next year, and the dollar value will be higher. It seems pretty much guaranteed. Other considerations, these do not include debt exclusion overrides, which we will probably need as we go forward. Particular targets for that, we've got the looming schools construction issue. DPW and fire department facilities are old. We have a proposal. Do we actually have the bids in for that? Mm-hmm. Okay, I hadn't seen that yet. And we've got a long list of ADA compliance things that the town is working its way through, but there may be some monies that need to go there. Next. Provisos. The numbers here are for preliminary governor's budget, preliminary town budget, which we are still working on. And I mentioned before that this adversarial relationship between the Healy and Trump administrations worries me. I don't know where that's going to end up, but it has potential of being pretty consequential as far as what we get for state aid. I think that's it.
Just curious, does anybody have, worst case scenario? So right now we're at 13% state aid. What is like a worst case scenario percentage that we're thinking, just in case?
Well, I asked the superintendent how much does the school get, and he said roughly $350K. So the worst case for the schools would be they could lose 350K. And, you know, education policies is on the hot seat right now, so who knows? But
Yeah,
that,
and to answer your question from last year, we were 13% as well,
Yeah.
so same number.
oh, was it
But yes, yeah.
350?
No, it wasn't 350, it was 13%. So our
Oh.
revenues, our total revenues from last year were 13% from the state. But I think the other piece, and Leslie, you can probably talk to it as well, you know, highway monies, stuff like that, there's a lot of, that's a good chunk of state money.
Yeah, but it's not included in the operational budget, but
Okay, right.
the chapter 90 monies are totally
Yeah.
separate, but, you know, right now, the governor's budget filed in January, the state revenue was projected to be, 4.4 million, and we end up having, we have assessments against that as well, so that brings us down to about 4.1 million that we end up receiving from the state in total each year to subsidize the town's operations.
Yeah, maybe I should clarify what I was saying about the schools. That's the pass-through federal monies,
Yeah,
which are largely not under our local control.
right.
I'm not sure for the town level, how much is passed through the state from the feds.
Yeah, I can't even, you know.
It's all over the place, right? Because it's like, you know, sped money, it's
Right, yeah.
transportation money, it's, you know.
School's in a much better position
Yeah.
to detail that for you than I am.
Yeah.
So,
Do
that's
you-
the first draft.
Do you want to talk about some of the things that you've discovered now?
Okay. I had circulated to everyone the proposed budget at this point. And again, this is the town administrator's budget. So ultimately, over the
That's
past.
good thing she's here.
Yeah, exactly. Over the past couple of months, Faye and I have been working with the departments to get their budgets in, compile them into the budget document that you have before you, requesting that they make cuts wherever possible. That first request didn't yield a lot. So one of the pages that you have in the packet that you were given, I believe, Faye, you ran this one for them, right?
Yes.
So this two-page document that is entitled Possible FY '26 Possible Budget Cuts. And there's a formula there, a methodology as to how we went about with our first round of budget cuts that we were requiring the departments to make. So we felt the fairest way to approach this initial run-through was to try to do an on-par budget cut for the departments that were not fixed costs, such as retirement. We can't cut that no matter what. That is an assessment that we are required to pay in. So there's certain, you cannot cut those, you cannot reduce those budgets that exist within. So we went and determined that the entire school budget, beginning before they ended up going through the layoffs and such, was actually 17,851,387. And that resulted, their layoffs resulted in a 3.058% reduction of their overall budget. So that 3.058 reduction is what we applied to the different town departments. I listed, obviously, on this sheet, those fixed costs that we just could not touch. If we could have gone through and reduced everything by 3%, we wouldn't be here having a discussion tonight, but we can't. So we further go down, and even with the ask of the departments, we would be looking at reducing the town budgets to be on par with the impact the school had with their reductions. We were looking at trying to cut $381,886. That still leaves us a deficit of over $450,000 that we still have to come up and do a surgical cut from somewhere, which, as Ray very nicely just, illustrated for you, you're talking either entire departments or you're talking, serious cuts in services. That has to be considered. So that was the task that the department heads were issued last week. So the budget that I had Faye print off for all of you reflects what the departments were asked to do You'll see the department cuts on par, 3.058% budget cut. And the ones that we could cut, we applied, what would that mean for these departments? And the farthest right column is the potential amended budget, where the departments told us where to take their monies from, and they would live within that budget. Perhaps not easily, but we would live within those budgets. I gave you a brief explanation to the right of that as well, that was passed on to me from the departments as to what that would impact. Where did we cut the money? I can speak to my budget the best. Obviously, my contract allows for, my employment contract allows me to buy back 2 vacation weeks a year. So I will try to only buy back 1, if at all. And I do buy back because I'm not always available to take vacation time, no matter how much it might be needed. Work has to get done. So that is why you have a buyback provision, both in the bylaw as well as your employment contracts and all of your union contracts. Everyone has a buyback provision, so that in the event they are not able to take their vacation time, it's not like, too bad, so sad, you lose it. It's, you know, an important benefit for your employees. So I reduced mine to take only 1 buyback week, and it's possible, if I'm able to take a good amount of time off, I will have no buyback, so that would be a savings in that budget. I further said, all right, I will not go to my annual certification training because I went this year in '25 when we weren't strangling for money, and I'm covered for the next 3 years. So I don't have to go next year. It is always beneficial to go to training to know what's going on and to know what is required of you, and you always learn something. But I will forego that, the trainings, for myself next year. And then there's toner costs that I took out of supplies, so Faye will have to figure out how to ink my machines. But that, you know, again, there's a lot of, sorry, Faye. There's shifting of costs here because, yep, a lot of walking down the halls. So that's how I chose to eliminate almost $6,000 from my budget. Okay, and you'll notice that it already had come in lower than last year. So I struggled, as many departments did, not to cut staff, not to cut hours, because on the town side, we truly are stretched very thin. And the hours that we have in those departments are needed. So I'm trying to find a way around, and I saw in the cuts that the departments gave me, they too were trying to find ways around not cutting staff hours, because that impacts service to the residents, that impacts the essentials to keep the town running. So those are all detailed there for you. In the end, our target was to cut, to be on par with the school, $381,886. We were able to go through and cut $362,858. So that means when Heather takes the reign next week, she gets to look at these budgets again and make further decisions and cuts, and having conversations with department heads as well, saying, well, we don't want to have to do this, but you may have to trim some hours. You have to come up with another X amount of money. So to be on par, we would be on par with the school when we end this, because right now we've only got to overcome another 19,000 from what folks have gone in and said, I can cut this, I can do this. It's going to hurt, but I can do this. That we still have a deficit remaining that has to be addressed of almost $467,000 of the 900 we're hoping to get in additional funding from the residents. And there again, we're still faced with, where's that 466 going to come from? Trash is not a service to the town that cannot be privatized. School overall cannot be privatized. Your fire department cannot be privatized. You have essential government services that you have to provide to your residents. So you have to look at where those cuts are going to come and where the impact is going to be felt by your residents, because we still have $467,000 to go through when we cut on par with what the school had cut. It's not a pretty picture, and sorry, I can't make it one.
I think, this is so depressing.
Depressing? Oh, yeah, big
So why
time.
don't you take the select board salaries?
I considered it, Raj, and I do appreciate your
400,000,
dollar.
right?
That's awesome.
500,000, take it.
So we are now down, $466,688.
That was helpful.
It was, there was $5, thank you.
I thought 100,000 per select board member, no?
Wait, you guys get paid?
So I think at this point, we've kind of talked about all of the things that we can do. I think the most reasonable option, if we can't get an override, is to cut trash. It would make the most sense. It will hurt the least, I think, personally. But
I think if you're talking in terms of pain, when you're talking essential government services, I think in that framework, it makes sense. But again, this is not my decision,
And also, we don't know, will it fly in the town meeting?
Right.
Exactly.
So
It
it
is.
just,
I can
Just to kind of-
say, we can cut the trash, but
I mean, even logistically, it doesn't really make sense to cut the trash. It really doesn't, because if we're going to go for the override, unless, and I pulled up a few numbers, but let's just say we go for the 900. Again, that's $290 per household on average. The average house would have to be over 1.35 million to be over the $750 it would cost. So I think the majority of people in town would benefit from paying a little bit more in their taxes versus cutting trash completely. And I think that the bigger picture here that we need to stress is these are our options, but this is really what's going to impact you. And if we cut the trash, there's no saying that we can get it back for the same price ever
Right.
again.
Yeah.
Right.
For the near
It doesn't
future.
come back, that's the point.
There's your risks on everything. We work really hard to try to keep this town running well and as financially responsible and as inexpensively as possible, but realities are realities, and the money has to be there.
Right.
It just, further too, the other consideration with cutting the trash is, in my local receipts are $250,000 that we're counting on to come in from the pay-as-you-throw bags. So if we cut the trash budget, yes, we do save that nearly $700,000, but we are also losing another $215,000. So the trash cut is a bigger gap. It alone is not going to solve the problem. You are still going to have to use, and, maybe a one-time money, oh, God, I had to say that, of, perhaps an overlay surplus, or perhaps, any of the one-time funds that we can explore. But it would be a smaller use, if we cut the trash budget to make up that, certainly a much smaller use than trying to take the whole 800,000.
I'm always thinking about it as what's the, I don't know, the perception in, what? What the perception is when you were talking about it, and if you, present the trash as, we'll take that out and okay, and we still have sort of issues in the budget or whatever, but you're gonna pay more, I don't think, I think there's just a couple of words in there where if you just say, it will take it out of this budget over here, but all of your budgets are gonna go up in order to fix this problem also. And I just think that that's it's a thing to do, but it's not a good way to fly by the town people.
It goes up a couple ways, because you gotta pay for it. So you might reduce your trash and all that, but chances are, the town starts to look pretty crappy too,
Well,
because
there's the people getting rid of their trash someplace probably.
There's a lot of costs involved in
it's a
everything.
lot, so to my earlier point, it's just cost shifting, and it's,
Right.
And it's just, it's gonna.
there's no way you can reduce that proportionally either. It's either, you've got
It's
it,
an
you
all or
got it.
nothing. You can't
Yeah.
just,
Yeah, so I think to Vanessa's point, it's really important that we all focus in on what's going to be the message here. I think, yes, trash is probably the layup that we can talk to. We can also speak to the library, but that we look at that, and the costs are, innumerable when it comes to, should we ever want to reopen the library? It's gonna take years.
and there
to
is,
get that certified. That's something that, again, from an educational process, that really probably only Mike Long can talk about as to how long that would take,
Yep.
because you lose access, everybody loses access to whether it be CW Mars.
Well, yeah.
I had a comment from SWAT. Could I just
No,
jump in
please.
quick with a comment? Norma Chain is Chair of SWAT. There's also another kind of piece to this too, that I just want to toss into the mix. There could be a little bit more cost sharing between the homeowners and the town. We could up the bag fees to cover more than 30%. Right now, that's all it covers. That could happen. We could work on some other kind of figure that homeowners could pay towards it that doesn't get them to the potential $700-800 a year that it's gonna cost them to privately contract, yet doesn't put the full burden on the town that it has now. So I just wanna,
Is one of
Yeah.
those options for homeowners to buy the totes
that could
possibly?
be discussed, yep, that could be shifted to them instead of town.
And that's not for 26, though, that's for 27 though,
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Yes,
Or at least contribute towards it, right? That would be the full purpose, but it could be.
right, so I'm just saying it's not really all or nothing. There is sort of more of a share that we could look at.
To that point, though, it's a smaller proportion, so, I mean, you know, if we're just gonna say, there's not $600,000 or $700,000 to be gained there, so that's the point. So, yes, on the margins, we can come up with that.
I also think it's really important for the message to show that, you know, some of, you know, other neighbors that have their own private trash, they're trying to get into this program because they're paying individual. And just, you know, for us to go the opposite way would just, it'd be detrimental, I feel. I just think that the message is really simple and clear this year. Last year it was complicated, this year it's simple. Listen, we need this money, otherwise you're gonna have to pay for your own trash, and it's gonna be significantly more than if we were to just pay for the override. I think if we can get that point across to the most people as possible, but not just for town meeting, but for the ballot as well, because some people show up for the ballot, they don't show up for the town meeting. So I think we have to continue this conversation even after town meeting.
Yeah, so revisiting the objective of this meeting, certainly we were looking for feedback, but in the end, yeah, we're talking about doing maybe a couple of educational sessions, maybe one for the library, one at the schools, and one at the seniors. But we're gonna narrow it down to what, for instance, Selectboard would be willing to support, what the Finance Committee is willing to support, so that we're giving them some clarity. Here's all the options, and for these reasons, we recommend A or B, whatever A and B ends up meaning in the end.
To that point, I would like to go back to the discussion of the progressive budget options at town meeting, where you start with the, you know, the budget, I forget it was 8 or whatever it was, the first one with no override, and then you move on to this small override, or if that's the two choices we wanna have, or if we don't, I mean, that's the other thing. I would say it seemed to work out nicely in other things where you sort of have a progressive bunch of motions, so people have a choice on the first one. They don't come to the first one and say, oh, well, if we vote this one down, what do? We have to come back to another town meeting, somebody has to go away and come up with another budget. But we can move on to the next one, you know, and that's another option. So at least you're making progress in the meeting, or potentially making progress in the meeting. And then why would we not wanna give them like, if things are going really well, and we're like, oh yeah, we'll do the whole thing, and we'll do the partial, and people are really receptive to it, and it seems like the news is going over, are we worried about the vote later, or something like that? Why wouldn't we keep going if we have a positive reception from town meeting? You know, and go to the third where we get rid of the structural deficit also.
I think that it's gonna be important to just stick to two options. One option is just whatever that number is, and let's just say 900, and the other option is nothing. And I think that's gonna be important, because you give too many people too many options, and then it just complicates things. But also, on top of all that, we may down the line need to ask for, you know, one-time, I forget what the term is, one-time funds for, you know, building projects in the near future too, debt exclusion for, in the near future. So I feel like asking too much is gonna be a little detrimental, but I think if we go into it, if we're all on the same page, and I guess I'm asking our select board, would you support a, whatever the number is, let's just say $900,000 override, would we support that as a select board?
Ray, I do have a question before then, you know, so the schools, they did that part, like a 500,000 something, they did cut their
They cut, I think the actual number was
500
545.
something, yeah. So, but apart from the schools, we need 900K to run that.
Correct.
That is not including any cut from the town department.
At this time, as I said, this is a snapshot
And-
from a week ago.
Yeah. Can we go with the town cuts, town department cuts, and then the rest of the money, can we go for that?
I think to that point, I think the two options should look somewhat comparable, right? So if option service cut is no trash and we make up the other 400K from one-time funds or from department cuts, then I think our override ask should be similar, where we've got the one-time funds or the budget cuts and then a 400 override. I think there should be, where it feels like to the townspeople that it's sort of fair, right? That either the town is doing their part or I'm doing my part. But
No, my
not
thing
that
is,
it's all 900K
So-
from me and the town's not doing anything.
yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I'm trying to, the school, they did their part, cutting some number of teachers.
Right.
But, as a town department, do we need to say, hey, we are also cutting here?
Yeah.
So we need this much money more. I'm just, trying to,
The town budget is lean as it is, so I understand that, but I
I
just think
understand,
to
but,
ask.
Leslie said, this money is coming, 360 to 858 from the town budget cuts by the departments. Can we minimize that from the 900,000?
For me
So we
personally,
are showing to the, one second, we are showing to the town, hey, we are not only doing the schools, we are also doing the town departments too. The town department's also taking a hit on this. So that's my, I don't know.
I was just gonna say, for me personally, I don't think I would support that, because we're already lean as we are, and if you take all these, teeny little cuts from everybody, it's gonna be a bigger, they're gonna feel it a lot more than if we were to just cut trash, for example. And, even if we do cut this, we still have to come up with the other money still. So it's like, I would just much rather not cut people's, vacation time and, cruisers and whatever the case is for our town, things that are important, over, $150 per household.
The message that I heard over and over again was, hey, nothing bad's happened to this point. Well, this is what's bad, right? So, I mean,
I think it wouldn't be a bad message.
we've got people saying that they're not gonna order toner.
Right.
Like, come on.
Well, my bigger concern is, of those big cuts, roughly, 20% of it, was a cruiser, right? Which is gonna come back next year in spades,
Right.
because he's gonna need two probably, and so that's kind of the
Which-
concern there.
and they'll be more
that's public
expensive,
safety, and so what do we wanna do there? Or that savings there is really gonna be mitigated by, or somewhat mitigated by the additional repairs, because, listening to what the chief says about how he's going through repairs on these things that have over 100,000 miles, and they get
this
they
was,
get beat, so.
this was given it, that's why I'm.
I know, no, I agree.
So,
I understand.
I'm telling the people, town residents, hey, the school did their part. The
Yep.
town is willing to do this part, so can you supplement the rest of the money? That's all I said, but I'm okay with
I hear you.
any of the things it goes. I
I
understand, there are big items, 63,000 on the police cruisers,
Yeah,
and 53 or 54 on the fire departments. They are cutting it from the salaries.
All right, so,
When you look at the numbers, just keep in mind, it's 3%. So even though you're talking, $50,000-$60,000 from the police or fire, when we're talking about cutting $3,000 out of another department, it's an equal cut.
Yes,
It
yeah.
hurts them just as much.
proportionally.
Yeah.
So-
I'm not denying any of those things. I'm just saying,
So-
since this is put together in the paper, I'm out.
All right, so to this point, though, this is a snapshot of what existed last week. We have a new town administrator coming in. She's going to have conversations across the town. We're going to change numbers, and
So we'll
things
know
are in
this by
flex. So,
next Wednesday?
this is a snapshot. And no, I'm not throwing you under the bus. What I'm just saying is that this is a moving target to some degree. This this is the flavor, we're not gonna have a hard number, this is the flavor of what it is. So let's, maybe now that we've had that conversation and going back to Vanessa's point, what are we talking about here, and what are we gonna
So
support?
My concern is, when we propose something, it should, we have to make it, that should be passed by the town meeting as well as the town. If not, if we put like 900,000, if it fails, then we have a bigger problem.
Well, and that's the
So we
point, I
need to
think we
think
have,
of a way.
my suggestion
deal with
here,
this.
and goes along with Vanessa's point, is I think we have two options. We have the budget presentation, the budget proposal. My preference would be not to spend, subsidize a gap with free cash, so it is what it is, right? And then we have an override proposal, and the proposal there would be the one we saw this evening, right? Was somewhere working on the 900.
It can be, I mean, again,
I-
to Raja's point, are we talking 900 or 500?
I mean,
They both have implications.
what, do we have like, is it still towards the lower end of 8? Is it 839? Is that kind of where we're at right now still?
I think you could safely go to 8.
Okay.
So you're shaving off 100,000, but I
So
think
let's
you
just
could
say-
safely go to 800, and we will find.
Figure it out. So let's just say we go to 8, then that on average is $260 for the average household. And then that bumps it to the 1.5 million for it to be not worth it for somebody to get privatized trash. So that number is even a little bit more palatable, I feel. So I think going into this, if we say an $800,000 override, is that fair?
What were the two numbers again?
So
800 for average house?
for 900,000, it was gonna be 290. For
Okay,
800,000, it's 260.
okay, but in neither case are they near the $700 for private
No,
trash.
that's what I'm saying. Either way, you're
So
still,
I-
I
and-
think that's the way you have to present it at the
I think
town
that's the way to
meeting.
present it, which
That's
is,
the only
this
way.
is the choice.
It's gonna make sense to people. I'm gonna save, almost $500 by paying this
Right.
money.
This is the choice. If we do this budget, we're gonna cut
Well,
trash.
and you
And-
could
and-
phrase it, you could phrase it to the benefit of our working hard with the
We-
solid waste
There,
task force did.
there is nothing else here to cut. I mean, we're down to toner, we're down to, like, we're not gonna buy that pack of pencils. The next move is, we're gonna start cutting bodies out of here. So, to that point, I'm really okay cutting trash, I really am. I mean, like, philosophically, I think it's a user tax, and if I'm gonna throw away the stuff, then I gotta pay for it. Philosophically, that's where I'm at. But, what?
No, you're fine. You can finish.
So, I mean, I'd be really okay saying, if we don't do this, we're gonna wipe out the trash.
But that doesn't solve the whole
But that
problem.
doesn't solve the whole problem, but ultimately, that's the
I
trade-off.
think wiping out trash is gonna create more problems.
I think,
agree.
It is,
So
ultimately, I think it does too, for all the
but it
reasons I
doesn't
talked
solve
about.
problems here.
So the thing is,
Yeah.
we can,
So,
eliminate the trash this year to fix the budget. What are we going to do next year?
it doesn't
What
fix
else are
it.
we going to
Yeah.
eliminate?
All right, so,
So just quick, I mean, I know, Clea, you mentioned the balance with the schools and everything. I think one of the things that we have to look at too is, and not that this is the fix for that, but the schools also benefit, their budget doesn't show health insurance and retirement. That all flows through the town's budget, which has had a substantial increase year over year. So there's some benefit that they're getting from fully funding that town budget, even though it's, they went through the pain, and I think that's something that we all have to accentuate, or emphasize during any presentation with townspeople, that they've gone through the pain and really cut. And not something that would necessarily support, and certainly wouldn't support it again, because I think we wanna make sure that our education system is. Yeah, well, let me reverse that.
Yeah.
Are we gonna get a turnout to vote for an override that doesn't help the schools?
well, I think this is with
Right now, you're not
education.
helping the schools at all. So why
Are we
would
gonna
I
get
as a parent show up?
So-
And I'm not a parent, it's somebody in the school.
Are we gonna get a turnout if we're threatening to close the library or the school, the senior center? I think if you're threatening to close the senior center, you're gonna get a turnout of
Well-
the seniors. Cause
Wow.
a lot of them show up to the meetings.
If you wanna pass an override though, can you do that without the schools being involved?
benefiting from?
I
think we can.
I think, my feeling is, we shouldn't be threatening anyone. So we should find a way to compromise, to say, hey, this is the money we need. Can you fund us? That's all, that's the way it is. I'm very uncomfortable in threatening either the school community or the trash community or the library,
Well, nobody wants to threaten anybody, but it's a
No,
matter of
that-
getting people to the meeting. Think about the last meeting. It took us over an hour to get a quorum. So we need people to show up in numbers and to vote one way or the other. If we don't show up,
They
then-
will show up, it's not like they are not, if there
But
is
the
a.
right people need to show up too. We can't have,
Yeah, but if you propose a right budget, if you propose a right 2.5 override,
so-
they will show up.
So what's the right budget?
But I'm not,
That's-
I
I'm
don't
not
know.
threatening,
I-
I'm saying something to vote for.
Exactly.
So if the schools are included, the parents wanna come and vote for that.
so,
Well,
I-
it
I
does
help the school
include
budget.
it does include a 300,000 increase over last year
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
schools.
Yeah.
So that would
So
be
we can
part
make
of
that
it.
point, that,
Yeah.
that this override is funding 300,000 for the school.
Yeah, I think if the,
I think we have
Cut-
to do that. I think you have to have people wanna show up to vote for.
Plus it's funding their health.
Yeah, exactly.
the health
Not
insurance.
vote for it, not against it,
Right.
right?
But
For
my only problem-
services that I want in
So,
town.
and to that point, the schools have done a really nice job of, taking some pain here. They're also, funding their teachers, supporting the teachers with a new contract. That's, a little bit higher than we expected it, than historically has been the case, but we're taking care of the teachers too. So the schools are, have integrity to them, so.
So
it's-
even at 900,000, we're saying that's helping the school.
The
We have
schools
to
are being
present it
helped,
that way.
for sure.
Yeah.
Come and support your schools.
I think you're right, Pete.
I think if it's 800 versus cutting trash and cutting things like, a fire person and a cruiser and toner, then I think that's fair. I think where I would be concerned is if it was cutting trash and using one-time money, because then someone could say,
For sure.
well, why aren't we using one-time money in a 400 override instead of 800? But using one-time money is a bad idea, so if that's just not part of the option set, then I think that makes sense.
so if trash is cut, let's just say, people are gonna want, answers. If trash is cut, what is the exact number that we need now?
So I think tonight's conversation just is that we really need to decide if we're going to go with two options. The numbers are something that we still are working on. So we're throwing out a lot of numbers here, but there's still a lot of variables that are being worked on.
So,
So I think tonight we just need to decide, are we open to having two options?
and what I think I've heard, and let me summarize here, and you all can object, is two options: a budget with and a budget without an override, and an override of moderate scale and scope, so 850, 750, somewhere, I'm just throwing out numbers there, but the more moderate number there that we've been talking about. Does that sound like where we're at?
Yes, and are we going to support that?
And are we going to support that?
Yeah, I think that really is critical. And just to keep it in context, and we'll have the information sessions, and, we'll get the message out to some portion of town. But the reality is, I would guess 3/4 of the people that show up at town meeting aren't gonna be part of those. And they're coming in cold and need to get up to speed in 5 minutes or less to make the decision on what they're gonna support. So it has to be kept very clean, simple, for purposes of letting them understand what they're actually voting for.
As somebody with more libertarian leanings, I feel good that this is a lean budget and that folks are, like I said, we're not buying pencils, we're bringing pencils from home, and, but to that point, I feel like it's a lean budget. Nobody's, everybody's feeling it a little bit. Something bad could happen if we don't have that override, and that's the message. So I think I can support that.
I think the other thing, Faye, that we want to get tonight is make sure that we have good education sessions running up to the town meeting. And I think that really is incumbent on all of us to get the message out to, I guess, the term I would use is to centers of influence in our town. I guess I was a little surprised last year when Jim Ryan, who's a former select board member, got up at town meeting and obviously was not aware of the consequences, or certainly didn't reach out to me or anybody. And I think those are the type of people we wanna kind of get in the fold, whether it be, not necessarily him, but, you know, Jim obviously, but others in the town, whether it be seniors, whether it be, you know, parents, whatever. Make sure that they are coming to those information centers, make sure they're tapping on their neighbors' doors and making.
What this conversation has done for me tonight is made it much more concrete and real, all right? So I think having it be that concrete and that real, kind of, you know, those binary choices are really important. I don't know that it was, if we're talking about 5 years and this big number, a lot of gray gets introduced as opposed to
I agree on that.
the discrete nature of it.
Just for sake of, you know, saving a little bit of time, can I make a motion that the select board will endorse an override of a number somewhere between 750 and 900?
Can I have a comment first?
So I think the number is not, you are saying somewhat, yeah, maybe for that discussion purpose, I second the motion. So for the discussion, you know, you say 750, don't you think we have to come up with a solid number and then go for the motion?
I don't think that we're going to be able to come up with a solid number. I think it's in our ballpark to give some guidance, but Heather?
I would, first of all, thank you all for letting me participate this evening. I would really respectfully request that you don't decide on a specific number this evening. I'd really love an opportunity to meet with departments. I recognize how much work Leslie and Faye and Leslie and the finance have already put into the budget, and it's probably going to land in that. I'm not suggesting that it lands elsewhere. I just would really love a chance to have a look at it before you commit to a number.
Okay.
Knowing that you support, knowing where you would like it to land certainly helps the rest of us
Okay.
zero in on it.
Yeah, I'll retract my motion, but I just wanted to kind of get on the same page. Like, if we're getting the three, you know, finance committee, school committee, and select board need to all be in support of this. I mean, informally, do we support something?
So to
Yeah,
that
I think
point,
we're gonna leave the meeting.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
have to
let's-
support, we have to run the town. There is no question about that.
so.
We have to support it, we have to run the town.
So could we have a motion to consider 2 budget presentations for the town meeting?
So moved.
Oh, second. Or budgets, I guess. I don't
Budgets.
care how the presentation goes.
Any discussion,
One
other than that which we've already had?
One presentation, two budgets.
Yeah, that's fine, just two
Correct,
budgets.
yes.
Actually, I think the presentation is a question itself.
Well, I wanna get to that in a second.
Yeah. But as far as 2 budgets, I think that's.
2 budgets, yeah. All right, so all in favor?
Aye.
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 Great, so we've got some action here.
So on the, I
Committee,
did
what
have
committee?
I have a comment about the
Yeah.
There's an opening.
education, presentation, propaganda, whatever you wanna call it. I think that we should phrase it in, like the trash contract is a fairly strong contract. I mean, isn't this trash contract lower than a lot around, just because it's a continuous contract, it's sort of a renewal of the old one? It's a pretty good deal compared to other towns around us.
We are doing very well as we've been going through this for the last several months. Our recommendation, they've come down from 6%, the initial quote, to 5% year over year. They've made a lot of concessions for us. They're willing to do more for us as far as education goes.
But I think this should come out. I mean, we're not doing things. We're doing things to try to save money. I mean, like, it doesn't have to be your presentation, but I think this should come out in what we're trying to do with the budget. We should do a thank you to them for the hard work, a thank you maybe to the school, a thank you to anybody else who's using less toner. I mean, I don't know what to, you know, but I mean, like go through this as, what you were saying was, this is a vote for something. So you're gonna vote for the town being, whatever, continuing on for a good reason, and we're working hard to get there. And I think that has to be the propaganda, not we're laying off people, we're telling people to bring their own pens, we're telling people not to use toilet paper, whatever it is, just to make the budget. I don't think that's what people want. I think people want that, oh my goodness, the volunteers are doing a good job, oh my goodness, the town, the municipal side's doing their thing, the School's doing their thing, we're gonna make this work, and we can come out of this, but we're gonna spend another $300, $200 a month, whatever it is, but we're not gonna spend $750 a year on our on our private trash, right? You know what I mean, like, make a propaganda that's a thing to vote for, not a thing to avoid.
So,
Yeah, again, Mark, as I said earlier, so the thing is, cutting the trash is not the solution. Because we can cut the trash this year, what are we going to do next year? Or if someone asks me, hey, you cut the trash this year, how are you going to fix the budget next year?
But I
So
think
I'm
we
not sure,
also,
that's the,
but I think we also have
advisable
to be
solution.
prepared for another override at some point when we try to recover a little bit, like, when things are getting a little better, we want to improve, whatever.
I'm not sure this is the last override.
we can contract with Uber.
Uber?
Yeah, Uber to provide ambulance services, right?
I think the ambulance is the only super successful thing.
That's
we
the,
got going.
yeah.
So,
But so I feel like our finance team has kind of the vibe of what we're looking for on that. Do you feel like you've gotten enough from the conversation to?
yes.
Yeah, I think this point, and again, this is first draft messaging. We've got some feedback. To me, the education process is gonna get us more feedback on, if the response to one or the other options is particularly negative or particularly positive, we'll adapt the messaging to suit. I will ask, does the Board of Selectmen plan to endorse both budgets?
No, I'm not.
I mean, so we would support either that pass or something like that, we'd support both, the people you vote on what you would like to do?
For instance, yes. I mean, it's the messaging that the citizenry will hear.
I support an override. I don't support cuts. That's me. You guys?
But if the override didn't pass, are you gonna bail on it, just, let's close the town?
Well, obviously not. I mean, then that would be
So
my
I would
fallback. I don't know what
That's,
you
I think,
mean.
the
I mean,
support
I think we're endorsing an override, and I think that we would, obviously, we need to support, but I don't know what you mean by support. Like, are we advocating towards one or the other? Is that what you're
No.
leaning towards?
You could support both and recommend one of the two.
I would absolutely say we have to support both. I mean, people worked hard on both of them. There's a lot of logic in both of them. I mean, Leslie's, whatever, she did this spreadsheet and decided to make everybody decide what they could cut in their office. I mean, you have to, there's not something not to support. It's just that you would prefer, as we all would, a budget that covers more things and lets you do more stuff.
So the reason I asked the question is we've agreed, okay, there'll be two line item budgets. Well, if 3 select persons endorse one, 2 select the other, it's not exactly a ringing endorsement for direction that the board's looking for, so. You don't need to decide that now, I'm just pointing out, the optics of how this gets presented and what is being supported matter.
And
Well,
I think it's actually really important that we do decide that now, because we only have a little bit over a month to get this out to people. Like, and if we're just, kicking the can a little bit, we're all here. Why can't we decide, what do we support?
Well,
Not all the select board members are here.
Okay, well, the
Christina,
4 that are
is-
here.
but the
I mean,
important
it's,
ones are here. The
When the
important
warrant article comes before the board,
but how much time do we have after that to get out and do the information sessions and
We
talk
have
to
to-
people in the meantime? I
you're
mean,
still gonna do those
we have to
information
do it.
sessions, whether you feel like you wanna support just the
So
override
can-
you or not.
Ray, can you explain what you are asking? We have two options. One is with cut, one is with going for an override, right?
For instance, but those will be placed there.
Yeah.
But for the optics to say the select board unanimously endorses A has a lot more power than we had a split vote 3-2 to endorse this one. I mean, it's telling everybody, nah.
The talk is recommends approval. That's all that comes out. That's what always comes out for all of these.
not necessarily. I mean, last year that came down to cards. And if we're holding up cards personally, I would like to see all of us do one or the other.
Hold on, no, when we voted.
Correct?
But when the motion comes through, it's recommend approval.
It's a clicker
Yes,
this year.
but
Yeah,
I
the-
think we're
the
talking
clickers
about
is-
individually.
This year clicker.
Okay.
It's unanimous,
Okay.
anonymous.
Well, to that point, if the board votes to endorse, one or both articles, then I will vote with the board regardless of whether or not, I personally.
We just said we're gonna do two.
No.
No, but I mean, when time comes.
Well, that's why I like the
So
escalator.
I think that it's important that we realize, and Heather, you can jump in at any time, because we have to have a budget approved.
Right.
And I think that's really the challenge. And I guess there's two political ways to approach that. You can go in with two budgets and hope that one gets approved. And, and that way you don't have to go back, because if we go in with one, I mean, that would be the resounding endorsement for the override. This is the only one we're doing, and if you don't prove that, well, then we have to reconvene town meeting and bring everybody back. So I don't know how convicted we feel that that's going to pass. So, I mean, I guess I would like to feel that would be.
But
There are-
even if you go override, even if the entire board supports the override, the town could say no.
They could,
Yeah.
and they could
So
say
then
no
we would
if
be-
there's no budgets, no other budgets on there, but, I mean.
Raising my hand for Christine.
Yeah.
Please.
I guess I would recommend or propose that option A is your budget with the override. That is the budget that is presented to your town meeting, with the understanding that you have a second motion, that if your first budget does not
Pass.
get approved, that you are prepared with a B budget or a B motion that then gets moved and you go forward from there. I mean, we could overcomplicate it, or,
And
but
maybe-
you just have one motion to approve this budget, which,
Oh, you could get a
Includes-
clever motion.
No,
The,
let's not
I
do that.
approve this one, and the default one is this.
right,
So yes is this, no is a that,
A lot of that-
and you
a lot
have
of
one.
that-
Well,
a lot of the
right-
semantics
right
will
now,
fall
I
with
think-
town council.
I think what we're,
I think,
I almost think you have to have
Two
that
motions.
second motion.
We've
But-
always done that too much.
but to that point, I think, we're gonna look at two different budget options, and then we can make some decisions as to how it gets presented and what it is that we're gonna approve. But right now, we've got the framework and the bones for two presentations. We're gonna, two budgets, that we're gonna refine down and get a little bit more granular. But, I mean, and then we can decide which ones we're gonna put first is our A, but, to that point, I think.
so we could go with a override, and if not, we can go to the second budget.
Well, again.
Whatever the thing,
We don't have
Override
to,
is fine with me.
yeah, we don't have to decide that. We just have to,
Yeah.
I think in answer to the question is, we're saying we want to take a look at two options. They're close. I mean, we're a utility infielder apart, right? I mean, it's not even veterans minimum to between the two budgets. So let's see what the override budget looks like, and, in comparison with the
So we have a
then-
meeting Wednesday,
Mhm.
so will we be ready to bring some budgets to look at?
We might be.
Wednesday?
Mhm.
So at which point we can kind of decide how we want to wrap that up.
Do you want
How
their
do
opinion
we,
on this?
And, yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, finance committee members, you want to chime in on this?
So I think the finance committee is gonna be doing a lot of messaging and spending a lot of hours getting the PowerPoint right and standing in front of people at the senior center and the schools. And if we're talking about why an override is needed, I think knowing that you all are going to be in support of that override is really important to us.
Mhm. To that point, I also would just like to throw this out there, that I would be willing to help at these presentations as a select board member, if my board is also okay with that.
I don't think so.
You're a member, you.
But I personally would like to help with getting the messaging out there. I think that I've got a lot of, school-aged people in my
Okay.
circle.
I'm terrified about not having, like, if we go with one budget, I'm terrified that we would not get one budget through. And then I don't want to go to the trash budget. Like, you have this is what we want to do, this is the trash budget. you know, I don't wanna say trash, this is the budget nobody wants. How's that? We have this one everybody wants, this is the one nobody wants, but it's what we have to do. If we don't pass, everybody else, everybody wants. I do not want that to be the way we do this. I think we have to fully endorse both of them. I think we have to say that this one will work if you don't want an override. This is how we're gonna make the town run. We're professionals, we're not professionals, but we're gonna pretend to be professionals and get this to a town that can operate. If you guys don't want an override, there's a big thing in town where people don't wanna spend more money on trash bags, they don't wanna spend more money on anything.
So are you comfortable then with the message being that we're ready to cut trash and we're ready to cut additional items?
Yes, we're ready to cut all the things you want us to cut. We're gonna bring an option where you don't have to.
Right,
We're gonna
but
bring an
are
option where you do.
you
I
personally,
think-
are you, which one are you endorsing? You gotta pick
I
one.
like having trash, I mean, I would like to do that.
So that, I think that needs to be the message,
But-
that we
but-
endorse this, but if we have a fallback plan.
I've been
Oh.
trying not to commit to this, but for 1,000 years, I've said I will never support an override, ever. But what I'm gonna say is, you know, logically, what I've heard, the conversation that I've heard is, the consequences of that are such that it would be just a really dumb decision not to do that. So, yes, I'm hearing you, yes, it's gonna be a lot of work and messaging, I need to know that you're all gonna support it. Boy, I've been really trying hard not to say I'm gonna go support that, but realistically, I mean, I can say principally, you know, philosophically, yeah, I wanna get rid of trash because I think that's the way people should fund services, is user taxes, but the fundamentals, it's $200 instead of, you know, it's gonna cost me $200 instead of $800, you know, so that's just dumb.
Jay, we are keep on saying trash.
Because it's
The
easy to.
the trash is one-time deal. This is like a free cash, 1 year. What are you going to do next year? That's the thing I don't understand.
Raj, but the point here is, that's the concrete hook. That's how you make, that's how you communicate this.
I mean, the other option is you close the library.
No,
Or the
I'm not,
library and the
you know,
senior
I'm not
center.
closing any of those, I'm not cutting any of those things.
Yeah,
But, you know, we are trying to say, you know, yes, we'll, as they said, you know, or someone said, you said us, if you close the library, it takes a longer time to bring it back. Same thing with the trash, if you close the trash.
If it
you
were,
know.
if it was.
So we have to find a way,
If it were
you
as
know.
easy as just cutting the trash, we would just do that.
Come on, this is fine
It's
this
not.
year, not next year. Trash is this year, fine. But
Fine.
also
I have a
Leslie
point
said, you
right
know,
now. Now I have a point to make.
$250,000, we are
All
losing
right,
it too.
last point.
This isn't gonna be the last point.
Uh,
I don't like this vibe at all. If this is the way the board's gonna talk, then we should endorse just one budget. If you guys don't want the other budget, then say that now.
No, we
I
have
don't want
the
say
other
it,
budget.
no, I think, you know, we have to give options for the town people, let them decide.
But you can't endorse one over the other. It's their choice. So we've done a lot of work over here. We think this will work, but it's a tough road to hoe. We have this one over here, which is a better road to hoe or something like that. You can't say this is the one nobody wants and this is the one everybody loves. All right, all you losers, you can vote for that, you know?
I
Get
think
in
that's
those
exactly
ears
what
for
we need to
moving.
do, honestly, that's exactly what,
I don't think
this
that's
is
the way
the
to run a
point
town
of.
at all. I don't think that's the way to be a selectman. I don't think that's, I mean, you have to have a budget that operates the town.
I
I think that's our fallback budget. I think that it makes financial sense on all grounds to have this override. I don't see any human in our town benefiting from cutting the budget, cutting the trash and getting their own. I just don't even see that happening. It's
just-
kind of a no-brainer to me.
It makes no sense.
But there's people in town that might think that way. Who knows?
Yes, there is. Yes, there is.
Yeah.
But the point is,
We could kick them out of town, I guess.
but the point is, I think, you know, a moderate override budget takes care of the town, it takes care of the people in the town, it takes care of the service, and it starts to move in the right direction.
I'm not arguing the point.
I know you're not. I think
I'm
somebody else here
arguing
might be.
the point about
but-
having two budgets. You wanna know if we're gonna support two budgets.
Yes, we're gonna support the second, we're gonna support the budgets.
I think,
But
you
we
know,
have to support the budgets.
Yes, of course, we're gonna support both budgets, but we're going to endorse one of them.
I don't think we can do that. I think we can recommend approval of both and then let voters decide which one they want.
I don't think that's good.
But can't you have an opinion? You can have a personal
I can have an opinion.
This is it, we're not asking you we're not the select board, we're asking you my personal opinion is I would like to support the override. What is yours?
Yeah, I would like to have trash and to
Okay,
have the
great.
override because it's not a big deal.
I hate the fact I'm gonna say it, but yes, I
Okay.
think I've already said it.
And Raj?
I want to run the town, yes.
Okay, so there we go. We've
But the
got four
problem is, you know,
people,
but
so
the
that's 4 out
problem
of
is-
5
the problem
yeses.
So why don't we just endorse one budget?
No, but the problem is, you know,
Because the town might not approve
the
it.
other town
I
administration.
know, that's
All
the
right,
reason that we
guys.
have to support two budgets.
Folks,
Well, but you can
Have to.
support it if need be, but recommend either personally or as a vote.
yeah, let's,
We'll
let's
take
hear
it.
the tightened budget, let's hear the
don't care what
tightened
they are.
numbers.
I really don't care what they are.
The
Let's
finance-
not get ahead of ourselves too, because there's gonna be contingent in town that may not vote for the
I know.
reduced budget, because they're saying, no, we have trash as a matter of right, so find another place to cut it, and we'll see you later. I mean, so that, because I've heard that at other town meetings,
Sure,
so.
We've already had the trash
We've
override.
had the trash
We already
override.
had the trash override.
So I guess. we
People
would-
think we've had a trash
No,
override.
but that's just what they say. It's like the other, news you get.
So that's just, again.
I like to
making
think that people in town are smarter and they'll understand if we give a good presentation, at the information sessions, even if they're just seeing it for the first time at the town. I think if we make it a very short and easy to read and understand presentation, I think people are smart enough to do the right thing.
I agree.
And we all unanimously endorse
Exactly.
going on, or recommend.
When do you want
I
to
think,
start the
if
information
we-
sessions?
If
I'm
we
sorry?
When do you want to start the information sessions?
reasonable override, town.
I think it's probably would take
Reasonable
another
override.
week or two to get the message cleaned up. Couple of iterations within the committee. I'm guessing start in
So-
a couple of weeks. I don't know, what does everyone think?
Heather,
Sound reasonable?
next week will be your first select board meeting.
It will be,
Perhaps you could update us as to the status at that point,
it will.
so that way we don't have to commit to timelines. I think everybody's aware of the urgency of the matter.
And I'll also say that select boards and finance committees right across the state are having these same conversations and having the same.
Same exact thing?
Different variations of, yes. And I think that the really important thing for West Boylston is to not let it become divisive among yourselves. Because if you all do present a united front, this will be a much less painful process for the voters. And I think it sounds like you're really making strides towards that. But you're not alone.
So,
We always agree.
as
I can't agree
as a
with
matter of procedure, Faye, perhaps you can answer this. Which meeting needs to close first?
I'm sorry?
Which meeting needs to conclude first? The FinCom meeting?
You can
Yeah.
conclude at the same.
Simultaneously.
All right,
So
so,
we're gonna continue.
You guys have another meeting, so you're gonna recess.
We'll recess and reconvene.
all right, so,
But I did want to mention one thing, the subject of pay-as-you-throw trash, and people are getting very excited about the numbers. Whether or not we go with a pay-as-you-throw trash contract, or it gets moved to people individually, there's no reason to think the annual increases are going to be any different one versus the other. So, there were concerns, well, we're getting 5% per year increases if we approve this contract. Well, I think you're gonna get 5% increases even if you don't go with this contract.
Probably at least, if it's privatized.
Yeah, I think that we have more leverage as a town than we do as individuals. So, there've been some concerns as it relates to that, and there's also been some concerns about the balloon payment for the carts in the second year. We could do a small debt exclusion override, we could move it to users, there's a whole bunch of solutions to get rid of that big balloon that would come next year. So, I know you're gonna be talking about this separately, I think they're manageable. When you look at the numbers, it doesn't make sense to cancel it, doesn't make sense to privatize it, my opinion. But I just wanted to mention, there's not really an alternative, and we go private, we're gonna have the same issues, maybe worse.
there's all kinds of things
Well,
that occur that way. Yeah.
Again, I am coming to the same point, add on to this. This is a 1-year fix. What are we going to do next year? When you get rid of the trash this year, what else we going to cut next year? Trash is not there, so you cannot cut trash again to fix the budget.
So, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Right,
Aye.
motion to